Okay, David, how are you, my friend?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
It is so cool to have you on the show. I love the product. I love what you're doing. I love that you're in Chicago. We're going to cover so much stuff over the next 20 minutes. And I want to start with kind of the backstory. I know that you spent some time in and around food businesses, restaurant businesses, frozen yogurt, and healthy vegetables, all kinds of stuff. What was it that kind of turned you on so much about food and this concept? And then we'll get into kind of the actual development.
Yeah, so we have to go back to right before my freshman year of college. I went on a health retreat with my dad.
Yep.
And we're both in shape. It was more of a father-son bonding thing, and we didn't really know what we're getting into. And it was a 5-day retreat where you hike 10 to 15 miles each day.
Wow.
A bunch of exercise. We did yoga for the first time, and the food is all vegetarian.
Is this your idea of fun?
That's what everybody asks. You actually have to pay to go to this place,
Wow.
believe it or
They should
not.
pay you.
And after a couple of days, we both looked at each other. We're like, this was a bad idea.
Yeah.
We're never coming back.
Yeah.
By the fourth day, we had changed 180 degrees. We felt incredible. And by the time you leave the retreat, you're on a mountain. You feel so good. Like you can conquer the world. And it was really, really eye-opening for me at a particularly eventful, particularly noteworthy time in my life where I'm going into college. I could be very influenced, and it opened my eyes to the power of food and exercise.
So it's basically immersion into a healthy lifestyle.
Yes.
In a very compressed time period.
Yes, that's right. And at least for me, like we always ate as a family together and my mom cooked, but I never consciously thought about what I was eating.
A lot of teenagers don't.
Yeah. I ate whatever was in front of me or where my friends and I wanted to go. I never thought about the food I was eating and how it was affecting how I was feeling and my energy levels and all those things. And this opened my eyes.
Got it. So obviously it stuck with you. And then after college, I guess you worked in the food business as well.
I did. Yeah. It opened up a passion for me in food. And we went back to this retreat a few times, and I, dove into all of the literature about different ways to eat. And I experimented with different diets, and I started exercising regularly. And so after I graduated, I went to work for a company called the Veggie Grill, which is now the largest chain of vegan restaurants in the country.
Wow.
At the time, they had 4 locations, and their whole shtick was vegan food for omnivores. So
how many locations now?
I think they've got 40.
Oh.
And they actually just came to Chicago a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And it's burgers, fries, mac and cheese, carne asada, but all plant-based.
Got it.
And, it was very eye-opening for me, not just from an education standpoint with customers, which is one of the issues we face with our business today, but they built such an incredible culture and were able to motivate and inspire people, even hourly workers, in such a remarkable way. And I took a lot of lessons from that company and the founder of that company and how he did that.
Fantastic. And then after frozen yogurt, you advanced your education, and here we are a couple years later, you start Tovala. Did I pronounce it correctly?
You nailed it.
Good. So give us kind of the key insight behind Tovala. We'll talk a little about the product, and then I want to spend most of the time talking about the people part of the company, but we'll get to that in a moment. Just to set up, what was the kind of the light bulb that went off for you, as many entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it was Sunday when I was cooking for myself, and I was using 4 different appliances to make meals for the week. So I was using a steamer device, I was using my oven, I was using the stovetop for 2 different things.
Yep.
And I thought, man, there's got to be one appliance where I could cook proteins, vegetables, starches all together, even if they have different requirements when it comes to temperature and time and all those things. That was the first moment of like, God, let's just combine all these appliances into one. And as I looked at the market and I saw, okay, well, that solves one part of the problem.
But there is something called a combi oven?
There are combi ovens, right?
Which is a professional oven, basically, right?
Correct. It's a professional oven that steams. That's the biggest difference, right? It's short for combination oven, which means you're combining wet heat and dry heat together.
Got it.
And it enables cooking everything from bread to protein to grains and desserts beautifully. And when I learned about that product, I thought, wow, this is a really cool device. But the leap was, how do we solve the full decision cleanup and take out the pain point of every single part of that process?
Got it.
And that is the business we have built.
Got it. So this is a very end-to-end kind of model.
It is, right?
Not just about the food. It's about getting them the food, preparing the food, cooking the food.
Yep.
The whole thing. Everything right. other than eating the food. That you leave to the customer.
We leave that to our customers to enjoy.
But to be fair, and there's no trash cleanup, so there's no dishes.
That's right. Everything is recyclable.
Yep.
It's cooked in aluminum trays.
Yep.
And if you want to plate it, you got to clean one plate, but otherwise nothing.
And just to be clear, this is not just vegetarian.
Correct.
We were discussing that.
It's not just vegetarian, it's seafood, beef, chicken.
Good. So the light bulb goes on. I'm sure after a gazillion meetings with investors, you raise some venture capital, you're off to the races. Tell us about how you took the big idea and translated it into the talent strategy, the people strategy. Were there co-founders? Since you were kind of the business mind, did you partner with a technology mind or a food expert, a chef?
Yeah, so I do have a co-founder. His name's Brian Wilcox. The business would not be possible without him because he understands not only how to build things at small scale, but how to manufacture them.
Yep.
We met fortuitously through a mutual connection. Brian was running a product development firm when I met him. Mm-hmm. And the initial basis of the relationship was, oh, hey, maybe I'll go hire that product development firm to build our initial prototypes.
Got it.
And then we got to know each other really well over the course of 3 or 4 months and connected in many ways beyond business. And Brian was the one that took the leap ultimately and said, hey, look, I believe in the vision of this business. I think you and me are aligned on the right things, values, goals, culture, what we want to build here. Yeah. And I want to build something big. And the nature of a services business is you're going to scale with your people. It's not going to scale like a technology company. Sure. So he took the leap and said, hey, what do you think if I come on board as CTO and co-founder? That happened in August of 2015.
Got it. And the two of you obviously divided up, I'm assuming, business and product technology, et cetera.
Roughly speaking, yes. To Brian's credit, he started his own product development firm. And when he was getting his PhD in mechanical engineering, he went and took business classes to understand how do I start a company. And so it's not so linearly divided. Brian helps a lot with the business stuff and all that. So I'm grateful for that.
Got it. So let's talk about kind of the scope and size of the business now. First, in terms of people, roughly how many people?
We're about 50 people now.
Okay. Roughly 50 full-time people.
30 full-time and then 50 if you include the folks that are making our food in our kitchens.
Got it. And are those kitchens in Chicago?
47 of them are.
Got it.
We have 3 remote guys.
Got it. Okay. But the kitchen, the food prep is in Chicago.
Yes.
I assume you distribute it in frozen ice packs or with the cooling packs.
That's right.
The home, right?
But everything arrives fresh. So the meals last 5 to 7 days and it's all freshly cooked.
Got it. So it's a completely different model and alternative to the food preparation companies where you're the meal kit companies, which I'm assuming targets a different audience. Those are people that want the experience of preparing the meal. You're targeting really a different segment.
Correct. We're not selling the experience of cooking. Yeah. The prep for our meals is between 30 seconds to a minute. You're adding some sauces that we make, but everything is cooking from scratch. So you get a fresh piece of salmon, you get a fresh piece of chicken, and it cooks perfectly. Your house still smells amazing. You're just not doing the work.
Fantastic. Brilliant. And so what did you do early on with regard to defining the kinds of people that you thought would be important for this venture? Did you do what some entrepreneurs do, which is to think about the type of DNA or values that they would have in common? Did that evolve later as you hired the first few people? What was kind of if you can rewind the clock to 2014, 15, what were some of those early things that guided the kinds of people you wanted to get on the bus?
Yeah, I don't think we were as deliberate about codifying the things we were looking for until later. Brian and I did it in a way that I've never really done with any other employee because he's my co-founder. Yep. And I tell everybody here that that's the single most important relationship under this roof. It's like finding a spouse or a significant other. Sure. And we spent a lot of time talking about our upbringing and what was important to us, what we wanted to build, what our long-term goals were, in a way that I've never done with other employees to depth, right? Yeah. With the first 4 or 5, what I would say is we didn't hire until it was a burning need. So we'd hit a point and realize, okay, we can't do this business without a software engineer or a mobile developer or a chief culinary officer, whatever it may be. Yes, the pain was too high. And that was a lesson that has stuck with us for a really long time that we want to do the thing ourselves before we go hire for it and do it up until the point we can't do it anymore. And we absolutely need to. And especially when you don't have a lot of money and you're trying to build something complex, I think that is the only way to do things. There were so the other thing we did with our earliest hires, for the most part, we knew them. And so they were pre-vetted in a way that is not the case with more recent folks, as we've had to hire a lot of people quickly.
You knew them in that you had worked with them, or you knew them in that they were friends?
We had worked with them in some capacity.
Okay.
Either Brian or I, or someone we trusted.
So you were your own referral source, and you reduced the risk of hiring a stranger by hiring someone that you'd already worked with before.
Significantly so. And that was the case with most of the early hires. The ones that did not fit, we had really, really close ties to, where we could validate a lot of the things we were looking for through third-party sources.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, did any of those not work out and it had an effect on the relationship?
No. So one of the things that we hold our hats on is, out of all of the full-time people we've hired, we've only had to let go one.
Got it.
So the core team has all stayed together from the summer of 2015 until now. And we've continued to add people and keep them. And Brian and I often question ourselves if we're being too soft. And is it just that we really like everyone? But we don't think that's the case. We're pretty hard at evaluating and making sure that people are delivering and adding value. And we've just been very, very careful and smart about who we hire.
The tough part for entrepreneurs is frequently, and we've talked about it on this show before, is as the business scales and people peter principal out, you need to bring in people perhaps over them. That's when things start to change.
Correct.
So that hasn't happened quite yet.
We've had to do that in a couple of roles, but we've been able to manage it, where the original folks, we found the roles that are right for them, that maximize their skills, and to their credit, they're very self-aware and recognize that they are thriving, and this makes them happy. And a lot of my thought and time goes towards how do we make a culture that keeps people happy and engaged and challenged? Because when we're hiring people, oftentimes we're not looking for the perfect experience or background. We're looking for a set of attributes that will allow them to thrive in the role we're hiring them for today and in a role in 6 months or a year.
Have you codified those attributes in a way? You mentioned you hadn't done it early on. Have you since then said, you know what, this is what Tovala people are all about?
We have. We're in the process of actually putting it down on paper and finding a way to put it up on the walls, if you will. We don't exactly know what that's going to look like, but we have talked to our team a lot about the attributes, and I have a list of things that I look for when I'm hiring.
What are just 2 or 3 examples that come to mind?
Yeah. So humility is one of the highest ones in our book. For a business as complex as ours, which has food and software and hardware, you have to be collaborative, and you have to be willing to put your ego aside and do what's best for the company.
There's no way in a business like as complex as yours that any one person can know it all.
Correct.
There's just too many moving parts.
That's totally right. And there's a lot of people we've hired here that have had a lot of success in their careers beforehand. Yeah. And they kind of leave that at the door and put their ego aside.
Got it.
Especially in the very early days when, I'm making food in our kitchen, and our chief culinary officer, who worked at Alinea and Noma, is trying to figure out how to cook a chicken breast, right? Our COO, who ran finance at Redbox, had to go across Chicago to find a kitchen. Traveling hundreds of miles away and, being in the kitchen and setting it up to ship food and do temperature testing. The only way people that have a lot of pedigree and have been really successful would be willing to do that kind of work is if they're extremely humble. Aside
from humility, what other couple things come to mind?
So ambition or drive or hunger, however you want to define it. Most of the people here are very, very driven, and they want to accomplish great things. And what I tell everyone, prospective hires and our current team, is the combination of those 2 things is extremely powerful. Mm-hmm. If you have people that are willing to set their ego aside, but are still very, very driven and want to work their asses off and build something great, it's a powerful combination. Yep.
And food is such a emotional thing,
right,
that it would seem to be a huge draw to a lot of candidates, right? It's not like you're working in some arcane thing that they can't identify with.
Yeah, that's totally right. I think it's one of the reasons we actually decided to move back to Chicago from Silicon Valley was we thought we had such a compelling product, and in a market like Chicago, we'd be able to attract a lot of talent. And I think most of the people that join our company, the value proposition resonates with them in some shape or form in a way that a lot of other businesses could never relate. They're not consumer businesses. They're not something you experience on a daily basis.
Right. And so the business was started in Silicon Valley.
It was started in Chicago, but then we went through Y Combinator about 9 months after we started. So we moved to Silicon Valley for 4 months and then moved back to Chicago.
Got it. I understand. And why did you pick Chicago? You could have moved anywhere. You could have stayed in the Valley.
Yeah. So I had gone to business school here. I went to Chicago Booth, and by the time we moved to the Valley, there were 5 of us. Everyone was based in Chicago. And so it came down to 3 things. One is practicality. Moving 5 people and 3 significant others to a new state is not inconsequential. Like that is something that we didn't really want to deal with.
Yeah.
2 is cost. Running a business in Chicago is much cheaper than in Silicon Valley.
Yep.
And 3 is the point I made earlier of access to talent. I went to Booth, my co-founder went to U of I, our COO went to Northwestern. We have all of the major universities around here tapped in some way. And because we're a unique business in Chicago, we think we can attract great talent as a result.
So on that note, as the business has grown to roughly 50 people, and as you've started to tap out your own networks, which as you wisely said is kind of the first thing that you do, what have been some other sources of great hires that maybe even if they kind of surprised you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm just thinking about the different people that we've hired. To be honest, most are still from our network.
So you're still haven't tapped it out yet.
We are, and that's right. And a lot of it is our extended network. So investors, other founders within Chicago. But we've only hired a small handful of people through other means, like folks that we didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Got it. As you do tap it out, which one day you will, right?
Yeah.
Have you thought about the recruiting, the sourcing strategy, the sourcing part of the recruiting process?
We have. We've thought about working with different recruiters around town, and I have a hard time justifying the cost.
Yeah, they're
very expensive.
Always be the last resort, right?
Right, and we've had so much success doing it the way we've done to date that it's hard to justify paying for it.
Yep.
We have done some job postings, and a couple have worked. Most don't work that well.
When you elaborate on that, when you say they don't work well, what do you find? Because I think a lot of our listeners still do job postings. What didn't work?
I found that the quality of talent is not super high. And my theory, whether right or wrong, is that people that are highly, highly skilled and doing great tend to be employed already and are not always actively looking. Especially in
a very low unemployment market.
That's right. That's right. And the folks that are, crushing it at their jobs, when they do start hunting, they're asking their network.
Yeah.
And they're being very, very prescriptive about what they're looking for. So they know, hey, I want to go to a Series A startup in Chicago that's a consumer company that has raised X dollars.
Yeah.
They're going to go find those companies.
Got it. So have you basically stopped with job boards?
For the most part, yes.
Yeah.
For the most part, yes.
So if recruiters are out because they're expensive and job boards are out because they don't work that well, happen to agree with you in general, what other sources do you think you'll tap into as the business scales?
I think what we'll end up doing, which I have done some of, but again, my time is somewhat limited and I can't do as much as I would like, is identifying the type of people we want and finding them proactively.
Got it.
And primarily through LinkedIn, which is what we've done in the past, is, hey, we're looking for someone between X years of experience that lives in this part of the world that has this skill set. Let's go find 200 of them and reach out, ideally through our network, and if not, cold.
Got it. So proactive outreach.
Yes.
Time consuming, but probably the most effective way to go.
Correct. And there are some tools that can help with this.
Yeah, sure.
And do a lot of the legwork. So that's probably where we'll end up doing most of our recruiting when our network taps.
How about employee referral program? Do you have one? Have you thought about putting one in place?
We've thought about it. It's an interesting question because we're at this interesting tipping point of about 30 full-time employees where we're still pretty familial. Yep. And my only concern with doing something like that is it starts to inject financial incentives into an area that today they send us candidates all the time and we ask for referrals, and people do it because they want to further the business and everybody feels invested. And to me, it's an interesting psychological switch if we start to pay people for that, where I worry that people will start to think about this as a dollars and cents thing and not about we're all in this together and we want to do what's best for the company.
Right. Well, Google looked at it and found that basically how much you pay makes no difference in people's proclivity to recommend people. It's much more a function of how often you talk about it and how much you promote the program, which I'm sure that you do. Every time you meet the team, you probably talk about the key openings, right?
Right. We do. And especially when we have, certain roles, we'll have better network with certain people on the team. And so we'll be smart about who we're asking for help.
Got it. So before we wrap up, let's get off recruiting and people part for a minute. Tell us about the vision of the business long term. Where is the goal a Tovala machine in every home, or is it something different?
Yeah, I think I would remove the word machine, and I would say the goal is Tovala in every home. And whether that's a Tovala powered oven or another oven that we're powering, we want to automate home cooking and give people the ability to have an incredibly well-cooked home meal at the touch of a button. And for now, that's Tovala meals. We're going to enable automatic cooking of other products over time, so that if you own a Tovala powered device, you're going to have a lot of different options for what you can cook at the scan of a barcode.
Would that include beverages or just food?
Just food. Just food. But for example, Tyson was one of our investors in our last round of funding. And part of the thought with them is they have all of these products in the grocery store that today require some prep. Right. Can we automate those things? So that if you go to a grocery store and buy a Tyson product, whether it's Adele's or Tyson Nuggets, and you come home and you've got a Tovala, you scan the code on that product and it cooks it automatically.
Right. And the vast majority of Americans, if I remember correctly, really don't know how to cook, right? If it gets over 5 ingredients, it kind of all falls apart. Or is it more that they don't have time?
I think it's probably both. And at a macro level, people are cooking less and less. Yeah. And technology is an enabler of laziness. That's something I believe in. And
yeah, sure.
The kitchen is a place where technology really has not made a difference in a long time. So it's coming, but just by the nature of appliances and how slow it is to turn over a kitchen, it's going to take time.
Yep. Well, you are definitely making an impact, David. And I give you a lot of credit because I knew when we spoke years ago and you were just kind of getting off the ground, it was just a gleam in your eye, and now your baby has launched, and I commend you for that. How can people learn more about the product and certainly try it out?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, it's tovala.com, Tovala, and you can learn all about the oven itself and what it can do and the food you can cook in it, and then also all the meal offerings that we've got.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for making the time, David.
Yeah, thank you.